Right. The concept which I propose for this unit is fundamentally based around the idea of who an artist is and what makes an artist. In my last project, I made a clear point that an artist is only considered an artist for what they make. For many, this idea stands to reason. However, the nature of being an artist is fraught with dangerous dreams and prevailing egocentrism, whether we would try to accept it or not. A great deal of what we think is inevitably trapped within our own minds. We're often lulled into a false sense of security in which we are convinced that as long as we hold on to dreams and ideas, we will survive as artists. But it's not until we actuate ourselves into the physical production of those ideas that we can call to closure our creative missions. I have used the proposal as a translation of this concept. I'm interested in the non-material nature of this unit, and from this I want to create a piece which physically implodes what Chelsea College is down to the smallest space possible. I've worked with this idea before. Right back at the beginning of my course I did the exact same thing, and I got all my personal items in my room and I tried to bring them into a really small 2x2 meters square. So that was including like wardrobes and cupboards and stuff like that. I've got images of that, I'll show you.
Do you want to pass this around?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all stuck to this board though, so...
Okay, right.
Well, this is what it was. I should have stuck all this to this fucking thing. There we go.
Well, don't take it off.
Anyway, I'll show you at the end. So now I want to do this, but within an environment that is external, consisting of every object found within the walls of Chelsea, from the artworks to the documents. Everything should be taken out of its environment and placed in the grassy courtyard area outside, outlining the 11.5 by 11.5 metres square. There are a few rules to this exercise. Firstly, all objects must be undamaged throughout the process of moving them and their final position within the square. Secondly, every object must fit within the square. Objects that are larger than the perimeter should be placed vertically. Thirdly, the final assembly must be safe for the public to be near. There should be no unstable or precariously placed objects, and no risk that any part of the assembly should collapse. Finally, the use of any device or material that will secure the objects in place is banned, such as nails or tape. Only the weight and stackability will be used to hold them in place. The process of locating the most optimal place for an object to be in will be found using coding software by assigning values such as size, weight and stackability to each component. Certain objects contain hollow openings. These can be useful for holding smaller loose objects. The whole process and final result of the artwork is to embody a kind of held physicality that exists within our minds, the one that gives us so much hope that we are tangible. This artwork is here to argue that this tangibility is far less stable than we would like to imagine. I've specifically chosen this time period of the year to make this artwork, aside from just the unit, but because Chelsea is full of people's own final pieces at the moment. By taking all this work, which is meant to immerse you within a space, and showing how effectively it can be shrunken down, I would hope that if made, it might inspire someone to challenge and escape their internalised artistic experience, and realise that art is not meant to be shown to other people, and not just exactly yourself. So that's the proposal. And then this is what I did in when I started right at the beginning of Chelsea. So creased. Anyway, it's very dark. I didn't have my printer, like I couldn't use Chelsea printing software, and this is basically what I want to do. So pass that down. I've just done that on Photoshop basically. So a huge pile of objects that kind of follow the perimeter. I can't really say that that's the smallest possible area, but I've just thought it was like interesting to work with that grassy space maybe. And then what I've done is I've gone around kind of a few areas at the final show, and I've actually written down dimensions of various objects and stuff like that, and I'm planning to basically input these into a kind of very basic program which I found online on GitHub. Is this kind of square stacking program. So I thought it might be interesting just to kind of experiment and see kind of how that fits together. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in like the idea of like artwork and tangibility, and kind of there's a lot to do with artwork. It's about how it's presented and what's said about it. But when you kind of reduce it down to dimensions, then it becomes this kind of transitional thing, which I think is quite interesting to think about and to work with. But I'm not sure where it's going to progress from here, because I really want to get into some more specifics. But yeah, that's basically the basic idea. So yeah.
So I am really interested in this aspect of your practice where artwork, or this sort of tension between artwork and data, or artwork as data, or data informing the instruction of an artwork. I can really see this as an extension of your practice.
Yeah, that's
But I wonder if you're actually going to try and realise this, maybe not to this scale, but
well, I don't know, because it's like I've got evidence of what like a potential exercise similar to that on a smaller scale is with the first thing that I did. But sure. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I've got a few routes that I've been thinking about. I can either really get into kind of maybe programming and looking at Python, but I'm really not very kind of technically knowledgeable, and the current kind of what's available online is quite limited, and I don't know how to alter it. So there's that option, or I can kind of go into more algorithm and kind of like sorting and that kind of aspect of things. I'm not sure. I quite like inventing quite long-winded processes and ideas. I think that's something that's quite interesting to me. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. There could be an option maybe where I kind of write a kind of fake account of my experience of doing this thing in a kind of fictional way.
Because I suppose what's different about this from some of your other work is that the system is really explicit. You know, we can see the evidence of it. It's this huge unmissable stack of material. Anyway, let's hear from some other people.
How far would you be willing to go with like imploding or like deconstructing things? Like, would you, for example, like deconstruct furniture to flat pack it, or maybe like, you know, break apart a canvas to kind of roll it up?
It's interesting because sometimes when I was working at the beginning of Chelsea and I was doing this, I found it quite useful to leave furniture as it was, because often furniture contains a lot of kind of areas where you can put smaller objects inside, so you can quite efficiently put things, fill in almost every single available space, as long as it doesn't really need to be a process of deconstruction. I think when it comes to more like delicate things, then there's a need to deconstruct them, but I don't know, I kind of, I don't know, I like the idea of just like taking everyone's work and kind of just like bring it into this one sort of Frankenstein-like thing that just sits out in the middle of the courtyard and no one quite knows what to do with it, you know. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's quite a complex process, because I'm interested in like just things that interact, and a way of looking at things where everything interacts, and you have to have a kind of a way of operating that allows you to interact with every part of that system, rather than only being able to do one aspect and then other parts kind of miss out on that. I'm not sure. It's difficult to see where I'm going to go with it, but I've got a few more weeks, so I'm going to see, kind of really experiment and just have fun with it, really. Yeah.
I have a question about organisation. So you talk a bit about like hollow spaces, so like a chest of drawers. Would you like intentionally like fill like one chest of drawers with every paintbrush in Chelsea, or would it just be what fits kind of thing?
I'm not sure, because it becomes something that's more kind of creatively involved. And that was definitely the kind of process that I was working with this thing, was very much like what can I put in one particular object, and I did kind of organise it by like how they related to each other. So for instance, like like artwork and stuff was all stacked like towards where the kind of my art supplies was and stuff like that. But I'm not sure, because when in this example I'm thinking of like an algorithm that almost kind of like works through it in a very kind of non-human way. But I like that friction between what like the interaction of what the artist is actually like doing in this situation, and like whether I can kind of think of alternative examples of the same exercise in which I do that kind of thing, where I group everything, or maybe I lay everything out in Chelsea. Maybe it's not a process of implosion, maybe it's just an organisation or something like that, and you show everything kind of as a kind of grouped up and stuff like that, you know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Would you consider using something like Blender and like 3D printing these? Because I feel like they've got like a quality of 3D printing to them. I don't really know why, but
yeah, I really would like to like have a go at Blender. I've heard it's quite difficult, but I would like to sort of maybe take a few real life objects and do like maybe an animation or something that shows how an algorithm would kind of go through the process of designating values to that and organizing them in such a way that it like the strongest objects are at the bottom and then kind of more delicate or lighter objects are kind of at the top. And there's this kind of, there's this weird kind of gradient. It's like almost by doing it you kind of organize the qualities of each object. I know, I really would like to work with it. I really would like to do something like actual 3D stuff with it, because at the moment it's just like very on paper and stuff like that. But I'll just think about it, and eventually something comes along and I'll do that. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, there's something that strikes me thinking about your piece for Unit 3 in the show, in this, that you have a certain investment in labour and sort of and seeing something through to its completion. And I'm wondering about the kind of labour force that would be involved in something like this if it was realised, and if that's interesting to you.
That's one thing I want to get a lot into details about, is like what kind of process would you do to kind of, how many people would require to like do all of this, or maybe you could do it with one person, but then that's going to take like maybe a whole year or something like that, because literally it took me about 3 hours just to write down a list of the 2 things in just one of the exhibition spaces at Chelsea, just one, and it just like it takes so much time. I think there's a lot of endurance-based elements to what I've done in the past, and I always kind of hate it, but it's always like I always end up kind of inexplicably ending up doing it, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe it's a big part of it is the kind of labour idea and stuff